You're listening to Podkey Daily News with the biggest practical stories moving today. A preventive cancer vaccine result looks historic. AI markets are swinging hard, and several global fault lines just got hotter. The clearest medical development is out of the UK, where researchers say women born in 1996 or later who got the HPV vaccine at 12 or 13 have seen virtually zero cervical cancer deaths before age 30. That matters because it pushes the discussion past risk reduction and toward cohort-level near elimination, at least in early adulthood. What to watch next is whether that success carries into older age brackets and whether the same vaccine logic can work for other cancers. Researchers are already trying that, adapting HPV-style technology into preventive vaccines for high-risk lung and ovarian cancers, so the immune system learns tumor-linked proteins before malignancy appears. In Venezuela, the rescue window is narrowing fast. Humanitarian teams say the first 48 to 72 hours are critical, and by day 4, the odds of finding survivors drop sharply. The practical problem is capacity. Many collapsed structures still have not been cleared because heavy machinery and specialist equipment are missing, so residents are digging by hand. International teams can bring thermal imaging, seismic detectors, drones, and vibroacoustic tools, but access constraints and aftershock risk are limiting how much those tools can do. The deeper issue is institutional weakness. Years of hyperinflation and corruption under Nicolás Maduro left health and emergency systems depleted, slowing supply delivery and specialist response. For now, watch the shift from rescue to displacement support, with survivors already sleeping outdoors in places like Altamira. The most dangerous geopolitical escalation is around the Strait of Hormuz. After a drone attack on an oil tanker, the U.S. struck Iranian military sites. Iran's Revolutionary Guard then answered with missile and drone strikes on Kuwait and Bahrain. Why it matters is simple. The strait is a critical artery for global energy flows, and Washington insists it must stay open for free navigation. Iran says vessels should need Iranian authorization, which sharpens a sovereignty clash Tehran has not historically enforced this way. What to watch is whether either side tests passage by force, because analysts warn a U.S. naval move to compel transit could trigger wider regional combat with heavy casualties. Markets are also getting hit by a sharp split inside the AI and chip trade. Micron posted a more than 4-fold revenue jump, beat analyst expectations across the board, and got a roughly 16% stock pop as AI-driven memory shortages kept demand elevated. That strength came with a broader signal. Memory remains one of the cleanest ways to measure real AI infrastructure demand. But elsewhere, the mood turned fast. Cerberus Systems priced a $5.6 billion IPO after cutting losses and nearly doubling revenue, then warned on margins and fell about 20% after hours. Oracle was worse. It announced about 21,000 job cuts, around 13% of its workforce, while still pouring money into AI infrastructure. Took $1.84 billion in restructuring charges. Warned those AI bets may not pay back, and the stock fell about 19%. Together, those moves helped drag tech lower, with semiconductor volatility feeding into broader declines in the S&P 500 and NASDAQ. Separate from fundamentals, Wendy's got the meme stock treatment. Wall Street bets buying pushed volume above Micron's big news day and sent the stock up for the week, but the reversal was immediate enough to underline the usual lesson. Meme rallies are fast, loud, and unstable. In U.S. domestic policy, 2 proposals stand out for direct household impact. First, the Save America Act would require proof of citizenship, such as a passport or birth certificate, to register to vote. Research suggests that could affect roughly 1 in 10 Americans. Former President Trump is also still pushing broader federal control over election rules, including tighter limits on mail voting, but there is a real Republican split here, and those maximalist ideas do not have broad bipartisan backing. The practical watch point is whether narrower voting restrictions advance while the bigger federal overhaul stalls. Second, New Mexico is now covering 100% of childcare costs for parents who are working, studying, or seeking work. The money comes largely from oil and gas revenues and a trust fund that grew from $300 million in 2020 to $11 billion. That's a major affordability shift, but not yet a full access solution. The state added nearly 4,000 licensed spots, and roughly 15,000 preschool-age children are still estimated to lack care. So long waitlists remain the bottleneck. Officials are trying to close that gap with provider loans, zoning changes, and higher wages, but shortages could last another 1 to 2 years. On climate, Swiss glacier monitoring is showing acceleration, not just decline. During a recent heat wave, meltwater volumes were enough to fill an Olympic-sized pool every 6 seconds for 2 weeks. The more important signal is timing. The tipping point day, when glaciers stop losing seasonal snow and start losing ancient ice, has shifted from late July or August in past years to early June this year. That means the glaciers are entering the most damaging part of the melt season much earlier, and even a decent snow cover would not offset repeated hot summers and dry winters. At the World Cup, FIFA is mandating 3-minute hydration breaks at the 22-minute mark of each half in all 104 matches. Officially, this is about player welfare in conditions reaching 35 to 40 degrees Celsius, though critics note some venues are climate-controlled and say the blanket rule is excessive. The practical effect is that football now gets split into something closer to 4 quarters, and broadcasters are often filling the pauses with paid ads. Managers are also using the stoppages tactically. And analysts have pointed to goals scored soon after breaks as evidence that momentum can shift sharply. Watch whether FIFA moves to a temperature-triggered threshold system later or keeps the universal rule in the name of competitive consistency. One longer-view story worth keeping in frame is Bethlehem Steel, because it still explains a lot about how regions absorb industrial collapse. Researchers classify the company as a reactor, meaning it answered crises instead of investing ahead of them. It failed to modernize in the 1970s and 80s, got undercut by cheaper imports and non-union mini-mills that melted scrap instead of ore, and eventually went bankrupt in 2001. The pension math became crushing, with roughly 7 retirees for every active worker at one point, and that burden became unsustainable. What matters now is the aftermath. Manufacturing's share of U.S. GDP fell from 27% in 1957 to under 10% today, so Bethlehem was part of a much bigger shift. Recovery in the area came less from one replacement giant and more from geography, public space reuse, local leadership, small business growth, and job migration into sectors like healthcare. That makes Bethlehem both a warning about reactive management and a case study in uneven but real regional resilience. A few shorter items. In Budapest, thousands joined the first Pride parade in 16 years after Viktor Orban's ouster, and police did not fine participants, but activists stress the old anti-LGBT laws still need to be repealed. Researchers also say tiny 1mm midges are the main pollinators for cacao, and changes to farm microclimates, especially reduced shade cover, could further threaten chocolate yields that are already falling. And in Virginia, researchers are scaling a citizen science program that trains dogs to detect spotted lanternfly egg masses, a low-cost tool that could help protect vineyards, orchards, and forests. That's the brief for now from Podkey Daily News. Thanks for listening. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.